In section 3.2, we're looking at parallel lines, and we're noticing if we know that lines are parallel, then we'll know something about the angles. So we're going to use these properties of parallel lines to find congruent angles or to find other angle measures when we're dealing with parallel lines. Now all these are going to be dealing with parallel lines and a transversal, so they're going to be using those special names from the last lesson. So first we're going to be looking at corresponding angles. Now we're going to take this one as a postulate, which means we're just going to accept it to be true. We can get this idea by just taking some parallel lines and measuring angles 1 and 2, and we'll start to notice that we're always getting the same measure. So these angles are congruent. Now we're going to write that in a shorter way in our proofs, just saying if two lines parallel and corresponding angles are congruent. Now that moves us then to a theorem. We want to assume as little as possible, so the rest are going to be theorems, not postulates. We're going to say if the lines are parallel, then alternate interior angles are also congruent, which we can abbreviate like this if we're going to use in a proof. But what we're looking at is if we know that the lines are parallel, then we can show that these two angles, alternate interior angles, are congruent. Now since this is a theorem, we'll need to prove it. So the proof would look like this. We're given only that the lines are parallel, so we can mark that on drawing. We have parallel lines. We want to prove that angle 1 and 2 are congruent, so we don't know yet that they are. So we're going to start with our given information, which was line K parallel to line J. Now, to proceed from here, we're going to use what we know about parallel lines. Now, this is something we haven't proven yet. So we're going to go back to this one, the postulate. We are allowed to assume this. We can only assume about corresponding angles. So I'm going to use that. If lines parallel, then corresponding angles are congruent. Okay, problem, I don't have any corresponding angles marked right now. But I can get some corresponding angles marked, and I'm going to just add another one down here. Now I can do that as long as I'm putting in my drawing. That's one of the reasons our drawings are so important. And I can say that angle 1 is congruent to angle 3 because we accept this postulate. The next thing we need to somehow connect that to angle 2. Well, notice where 3 and 2 are right now. I can see that 3 and 2 are congruent because they are a special pair. They are vertical angles, and vertical angles are always congruent. So we can say angle 3 is congruent to angle 2. Now notice how this links, 1 to 3, 3 to 2. If we use the transitive property, we know that the congruence of angles is transitive. So I can say that angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. Note that's what we were trying to prove, so we've just proven the alternate interior angle theorem. The next theorem is about the consecutive interior angles. It's similar to the last one, except now we're looking at consecutive interior angles. And also what we notice, these are not congruent, these are supplementary, which means that angle 1 and angle 2 will add up to 180. We will do the proof of this one at a later time. Postulate 3.3 then is talking about alternate exterior angles, and it also comes to the conclusion that they are congruent, and the proof to this is almost identical to the alternate interior angle theorem. Okay, now another way we can use this is if we're given an angle, so like here the measure of angle 1 is 115 degrees, we might be asked to find the measures of other angles. So we need to recognize a relationship. Since 1 and 3 are in the same position, the bottom, kind of bottom left over here, bottom left, so they are corresponding angles, and we know that corresponding angles are congruent, so the measure of angle 3 would also be 115 degrees. Now the problem also says justify your answers. We'll need to say why. Now actually I should have marked these lines are parallel here, because that is important. So if the lines are parallel, then corresponding angles are congruent. And then we look at angle 2, we'll notice that angle 1 and angle 2 are alternate interior angles. So if lines are parallel, alternate interior angles are congruent. And so angle 2 is also 115 degrees. And we could have also noticed that those are vertical angles at that point. Sometimes the same questions will involve variables and ask us to do the same thing. It's still basically the same idea. We've got a 120-degree angle here. I note that it's in the same position. I have corresponding angles with 3x, so those two angles are congruent. If I look at angle with the y marked here, I'll notice that these are consecutive angles. And consecutive angles should add up to 180 degrees. They're supplementary. And so we can solve each of these equations to find x and y. Now it is important to note that these lines must be given to you as parallel before we know that these angles will be congruent or supplementary.